in arrays, we saw that values are ordered by indexing, meaning we can access them using numbers. It's kind of different in objects. One being that they are not accessed by numbers but rather by keys. And secondly, while an array typically represents different kind of values, an object usually will represent a single entity. For instance, in the example I give with the arrays, we have the names of maybe different people on an attendance sheet. However, for an object, we can have the attributes of a specific person or entity. So, for instance, you can have someone and have their name, their age, the color of eyes, favorite color, and so on and so forth. Whatever describes just that particular person. So, for instance, we can have someone called John. All right, and John can be 25 years old. Okay, favorite color is red. Be a male, and probably doesn't have a pet. Okay, no pets. Okay, so these are just different information that describes John, and we can put this into an object. So what does an object look like first of all, and then how can we describe these different attributes of John into an object? An object looks like this. I'll be storing it into a variable as well. So let's have var person is my variable name equals to, and we saw an array uses square brackets, but an object uses curly brackets, and this is an object in JavaScript. Now, real simple, right? So while this is a valid object, as you can guess, there is actually no attribute within this object. So let's start creating new attributes. Now, for instance, we want to describe this person, and this person can have a name, and that name will have an actual value. So name here will be the key, and the person's actual name will be the value, because object works with keys and values. So for a key, we can have name, okay, and this is the structure which object works with. You have the key, you have a colon, and then you provide a value. Now the value would be a valid JavaScript value. So it can be a string, a number, a boolean, a float, whichever you choose. For names, we use strings, so I would have a string John. Now you notice that the name, I didn't need to put it within quotes, okay, even though it will still work, but because this is a key, JavaScript understands this syntax that this is a key for an object, so it doesn't mind if you don't use quotes for the keys. So currently we have person with one attribute. Now we can have more. All you just need to do is at the end of the first value, just use a comma, and then you can continue with the next property, even on the same line, but I just want to put mine on a new line. And the next thing about John, or this person, is there's an age, okay, and as we described, the age is 25, and I can have age as 25. Now notice, first I use the string value, now I'm using a number value to describe the age. We can have the favorite color, and that is red, okay. We can have the gender, and that is male, and we can have another property to describe if this person has a pet or not. I will just call the key has pet, and I want to use a boolean to say no pet, because it can either be yes or no. So if John doesn't have a pet, I would just say false, there's no pets, and that's all. So This here is our main object, right? We're just storing it within a variable. So we can see how we can describe a specific entity using objects. Now, JavaScript has an easy way to create an object. There's actually a different way to create objects using JavaScript as well, but this just gets you started. Different programming languages have different ways of creating objects. For instance, in Java, you would definitely need to create a class first to have an object. But I think this is a very easy way for you to visualize your object, understanding that your object is one entity, right? And you can have keys, which are attributes for that object, and a value. So for instance, a person would have a name, an age, etc. Let me get rid of those descriptions up, and next thing I want to just print the object with document.write 9, and I'll print the object stored in our variable. If I should save and reload, so we see this. So what happens here is when we used arrays, we're able to easily print it out because our computer could just extract the values and put them together, but it doesn't really work straightforward for objects. Okay, so there are a couple of things we could do, but I would just use a specific one now. You don't need to understand how this works, just use it. So there's a function we can use, and that's just JSON dot stringify, which basically helps us to convert the JavaScript object to a string. That way we can just see everything within the objects. Okay, all right, so now we can see our objects fully. Name is John, age 25, favorite color red, and every other attribute within the object. Now beside this, we can actually see specific attribute within this object. So for instance, if we have objects stored in person, we can access either the name or the age or whatever property that exists. So first off, let me get rid of this, and let's say we want to get just the name of person. We can do this with the syntax: have the object person, all right, follow that with a dot, just a dot, full stop, and you select which of the attributes you want to display. So for instance, I want to display the name, and I can have that. So person.name, which basically means what is the name of this person, or what's the name attribute in this object. If I should save and refresh, you can see we get just the name. Same thing can be done for any other attributes, age, and we get just the age. It's also possible to access this attribute using square bracket, just like we do with arrays, but since it is keys, and keys are typically strings, you would have to use like square brackets. But in arrays you use numbers, but here you have to use a string of the key. So for instance, name. I typically in most cases just use the dots because it's, well, cleaner. So that name, this works. So we've seen how to access an object. When you create an object using this curly bracket, you provide the keys and associated values for that key. You can print a specific attribute by using the dot followed by the attribute. And if you want to see the whole object in your browser using the document.write line, you need to convert the whole thing to a string, and JSON.stringify, as we saw earlier, helps us to do that. So that way you can define entities and show each of those values to the screen. Now of course we can do more, and we can also create more complex objects with this, but this gives you an idea of what an object looks like. Some people refer to this as maps, but it's still the general idea of creating objects, which is basically keys and values.